Hello, and welcome to Creative Resistance. I'm your host, Lisa Kramer. In this podcast, I seek to challenge societal norms and start complex conversations about ways to make a more just society with creativity, collaboration, empathy, and a touch of resistance. Today, I'm talking with my partner at Spark Collaborative, an online community for anyone who seeks more creative approaches to life. Jessica, welcome. Let's start with you introducing yourself.
I totally forgot I was going to have to introduce myself.
You didn't have
Hi,
to, but
Lisa. Good
go for it.
morning.
Hi.
I'm really excited to be here today. Yeah, I work with you over at Spark Collaborative. I've sort of fighting how our world wants me to be ever since I was really little, and I wanted to be creative all the time and got in trouble for it sometimes. And then as an adult, was constantly being told that the way I think is wrong, sometimes outright, but most of the time it doesn't happen outright. It's just sort of what gets told to you. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I so you and I have actually never met in person.
No, we haven't, but we've been working
Um,
together now for, can you believe it? Like 3 years, I think it is.
four.
Four?
Isn't it
Four
four?
years,
Well,
yes, because we met in
we met 4
2020.
years ago, but we've been probably working together for about three.
Yeah,
Um, So we met during the pandemic. This is
yeah.
2024, and that was
No, yeah, oh yeah, math is
2020.
not my strength today.
Yeah. We met through the Global Play Brigade. We were
Mhm.
on a committee together, and I think immediately hit it off. And we still have not met in person. I do want to change that. I would love to change that,
It'll
but
happen someday.
yeah, it will. It will. So clearly we reside very far from each other. You're on
Mhm.
the East Coast. I'm in the Midwest.
Yes. And funnily enough, I used to go to the Midwest every summer, but just around 2020, I stopped doing that. So there's a high chance that Jess will meet my husband before she actually meets me because he still goes out
Yes.
there every summer. So one never knows. Anyway, so I just wanted to talk today. Like, this is, as you know, only the second episode of this podcast. And I just would like to talk about what creative resistance means to you. So, what do you think?
Oh, that is such a good question. And it's so early in the morning. Uh,
Trust me, I'm not awake either. I'm going to tell the truth here. I completely spaced today and just texted me to see if we were still on. So we are a little bit wacky today, but that's
and
okay.
I'm not normally the organized one when it comes to schedules. It's
Right.
usually Lisa.
So we're going with the flow
Yeah.
and we'll see what comes out of this.
One of the first things that's coming to mind, and this is not my full definition. I probably don't have a full definition, but I can tell you one thing that it's not. It is not SMART goals. It is not falling in line and creating SMART goals for everything. And the reason that comes to mind is I just got off of I was at a conference with a bunch of colleagues, and it was a very sort of, yay, yay, our profession. And it was great. I mean that in sincerity, like it's those things are really wonderful. And nobody talked about SMART goals at this, but there's this kind of underlying like compliance with our leadership and how we need to report things and whatever. Anyway, no one talked about any of that, but it's toward the end of the year and there's reporting coming up. So the first thing that popped into my head is that creative resistance is not SMART goals.
Okay.
It is not
So,
that's not a good
so it
definition, but we'll
like
talk
meaning
around it.
that there's not one right way to achieve something or there's multiple
It's
approaches towards achieving goals. There,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
that. And there's also sort of a depth to creativity that isn't present in something as what I would say superficial as like a SMART goal. I
Yeah.
can't believe I even started with SMART goals. Like that's the weirdest thing for me to start with because I hate them so much.
But I think that's what, for me, why I wanted to start this podcast and what I'm about. So recently, I've been talking to a lot of different coaches for various reasons, and many of them have pointed out. I mentioned my fatal flaw about my money issues in the previous episode, but also that part of my struggle is clarifying who I'm working with and why, and like that ideal client concept. And I completely
Yeah.
understand that. But at the same time, when you're working with creativity, and when you're like me, I've been in creative fields for almost my entire life.
Mhm.
I work project by project, and every project is built around a different goal. I mean, even if you're in theater, the goal is, of course, to get the show up if you're directing a show, but the show itself has different goals that are based on the play. It's based on the cast, it's based on the theater you're working at.
Mhm.
So like there's a deadline goal which you need to align with, that the
Yeah.
project has to end. But how you achieve that, how you get to that end has always been for in when you're in a creative field, it's there's different, you try different things. I recently commented that right now I feel like I come continually throwing spaghetti at the wall, and most of it's falling off, so the floor is covered in spaghetti. It's not sticking, but I don't feel bad about that because the process is so exciting. So I get where you're coming from, because I think you're like me, that you want, like, you know what the end point has to be, but the way you get there needs to align with who you are
Yeah.
inside. Maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's there's something you said that my background is urban planning. So I was a city planner for a long time, and
Mhm.
I city planning, economic development. Like I did all these things that don't sound creative when you say them, but they're all very creative because each community has a different personality,
Yeah.
right? Each project has different obstacles. It probably could be said about um pretty much all professions out there. Like there's some version of this out there with all of them. I think where to me with the creative rebellion where the rub comes in is when there are some people who think that it you could need to follow a specific way of doing things, or even right down to like, you know, even though you were at a council meeting until 10 p.m. last night, you need to be in at 8 a.m. the next morning. Like that's a stupid example, but like that there's that you have to like follow certain rules that really are not real rules, but the rules are being imposed regardless, even though they're not real rules. They're just the way someone else thinks everyone else should be acting and working. Does
They're
that?
imposed by, no, that I don't think
Yeah.
that was a stupid example at all. I think that, all right, if one thing that came out of 2020, which um the business world, or the capitalist kind of consumption
Yeah.
production world is struggling against, was the idea that people can actually work from home, achieve as much as they work
Yeah.
when they work in an office, sometimes more, and have a better balance. The and that's a reality that was proven, but that doesn't matter now. Everyone's like, no, you have to work these hours, this time, this, it's those rules. It's a concept that society has to be governed by rules. And I'm not saying anarchy should rule.
Yeah.
That's except for me, like the rules of society should be do no harm,
Right. Yeah.
be kind to others,
Like
all of those.
The AI robot rules, right? The do no harm.
Do no harm. But AI, that is a whole other issue. But it's just funny, like that people continue to say there's only one way to achieve thing, and you have to check off the list. And I think that's, for me, that's part of this idea of creative rebellion or creative resistance that we need to look at, because society's shifting towards a more rule oriented way,
Yeah.
where it's like, if you're not if you're not in line with what everybody says you should be, then you are not part of society in some capacity. And that's hugely problematic. That eliminates so many people from just being able to live use free
Yeah.
lives. And by free, I mean the right to live your life the way you want to, which means
Yeah.
if you don't want to go to work at 8 in the morning, but you can still get your work done by going in at 10, then that's what you should be able to do. Your house
Yeah.
should come in first. But
The time example clearly is something that has plagued me for I would say about half my career. I'm in a role now where there's a little more flexibility, but I generally do actually start at 8 now, because
mm,
I'm also getting older, and I don't sleep as long, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But well, do you find like I'm starting, yeah, I mean, I'm working mostly for myself right now, so my hours are my hours and that's fine,
Yeah.
but I also feel better and get more done in a shorter time. Like I'll sit down and I'll be working for like 2, 3 hours straight, just pounding out whatever I'm working on. And then I'm like, I achieved my goals for the day, and I could either work on something else, which sometimes I do, or I can enjoy the rest of my day. And I feel better because I'm sleeping better, except for dogs, but that's a whole other issue
You
too.
know, this is funny though, because I did some pretty extensive time audits here and there because I was always worried. I'm an Xer, and all
Uh,
of the boomer bosses that I have had in my career have always been just weird about time. And I always wanted to know for sure that if anyone ever complained to me, and I've had a couple really bad ones, that's
yeah.
why I would do the time audits, because I had some that were really awful to me, like abusive. It was terrible. So I did a lot of extensive time audits, and every so often I still do them just because it helps me if I start to feel like really scattered, like, oh my gosh, I've been working for the last 2 weeks and I can't point specifically to the things that I got done. So I'll do a time audit at that point and I'll start to get a handle on like where am I spending my time. And I'm always spending it on the things I need to spend it on. It's that there are so many things happening like in those past 2 weeks when I was like, what did I actually get done? There were so many things happening that I just they were all like little things that I couldn't actually point my finger to and say, oh, I accomplished, see that pretty report there. Or do you see, couldn't point to it because they were all like little things. Um,
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting.
so I think another thing that comes to mind when I think about a definition, what creative rebellion means to me is task oriented versus process oriented. Um, I've I have been in a number of situations that um should have been, I should say should, in a
Uh,
number of situations that called for this idea of connection before content. So that's from oh my goodness, I'm not going to remember his name right now. It's from Chad Littlefield. Um
Say that again.
Chad Littlefield.
Bad Littlefield. Okay.
He has some wonderful facilitator. He does a lot of like facilitation and a lot of keynote speaking and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Anyway, he always talks about connection before content. And what I have noticed a lot of times that even when, so a lot of the work I do involves um, community members coming together around a wicked problem. So around an issue in the community and in the world that has many different approaches and many different perspectives, and there isn't one way and one right
Hmm.
solution, but that you need everybody's perspective and input in order to design for making things better, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking about solving the problem. You're talking about
I see what
designing
you
for making it better.
mean.
Yeah. And so, and better for everyone, right? Not
Yeah. Right.
just better for a few. And so, a lot of times, my work involves a group of people who really care about an issue coming together and wanting to work on that issue. But what I notice over and over, and I think this is just sort of the influence of our society and how we've developed, is like they come together and it's like if we're not doing little tasks, and I don't mean to say little because those tasks are super important. They're still volunteer tasks, right?
Yeah.
But if we're not doing tasks immediately, then we're not doing anything, is what I think a lot of people feel. And we end up not connecting with each other because, oh my gosh, as we go on, we need each other more and more. We need each other to stave off, social isolation. We need each other. We need to connect with each other because we all care about, like a group that's coming together, they all care about that issue. But they're not making as many personal connections with each other. They're just like kind of instead of collaborating, they're coordinating. And that's
Yeah.
what's hard. They come together and they're like, okay, I'll take this piece, you take that piece, and then we'll go do our tasks. We'll come back next month and we'll report on how the task went. That's coordination.
Yeah.
And collaboration is,
Or
hey,
it
I
is
see your
different.
heart. I see that you care about
Yeah.
this as much as I do. You see my heart. You see how that I care about this as much as you do. What could we do together? Here's my perspective. Here's your perspective. Here's all of their perspectives. Knowing all these perspectives, what can we do together? Not what can we as a majority decide what task is going to be done right now, but what can we design together? So sorry, that was
No,
a lot.
I am fascinated by that, and it's just ringing a lot of bells because uh, I think that people see that creative approaches or anyone who comes from something creative that we're all loosey goosey, like I'm head in the clouds, unable to be organized and everything. And I will tell you that I'm probably, other than this morning, one of the most organized people I know when it comes to like scheduling and stuff. As a director, it takes a lot of coordination, but the process in that rehearsal room or the and and I know the deadline for when you have to have the show up, but what I might think the show is going to look like versus where it ends up will be different because even though I have a vision, there are how many other people who are a part of that collaboration. And I think that I don't know when it happens, but people don't learn how to collaborate. A lot of times
Yeah.
when I was teaching at the college level, if I say group work and everyone would give that groan, oh my God, because they see it as this division of labor where one person does most of the work, no, the other person doesn't, and you know,
Yeah.
and they get it in at their skin or their teeth, or
But
they
is it
divide
sometimes,
tasks
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is it sometimes because the one person feels like it should have been done
their
the
way.
way they really wanted it to be done?
Right. Right. For me, a good process leads to a good product. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring the organizational steps that you have to get to a
You're
product,
holding the space for it to happen,
holding the
though.
space for it to happen. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't learn how to do that. And I think that's what's missing. And like now, as AI is coming in, I knew we'd get to AI eventually. I'm finding that people are more about product. They're like, okay, AI makes things faster. So no, you have to work at the speed of AI, which is impossible, rather than allowing for the process of creation. Because I'm doing some side work where I'm training AI models with language and stuff. And that process takes time. I took
Mhm.
2 hours yesterday to do a project that they said should have taken 50 minutes. And
You say 15?
50
Oh, 50,
this
but
time, but that's
still
not, no, but I have seen
less
one
than
on
half.
that
Yeah.
site. On that site, I saw one project, which I won't take, that had 7-minute limits. 7 minutes to do whatever they were trying to do. And I'm like, you cannot train humans to be AI. It should be
I
the
feel
other
like
way.
part of this is an experiment by our robot overlords
Well,
to
possibly,
see just how smart we are.
right.
So they
But
know how much smarter they need to be. No.
right, it's training them to try and like, yeah, but it's just it's so product is become it's like work more, let's get more time, you can get more done, but
Yeah.
why when the quality of work gets affected and there's no joy in the work? And I think for me, creative resistance or rebellion or whatever is saying no, humans
Mhm.
first. Humans first.
So so you may not love what I'm going to say next. However, I will say one thing that I have come to do with AI has been I actually collaborate with it. I'm not asking it to
Oh
do
yeah,
things with
no, I
me.
think that's great.
Yeah, and
I'm not against collaborating with
I'll
AI.
feed it sort of my own writing or
Yeah.
transcripts of because I have a podcast that I do for work. So I'll feed it like a transcript and
Mhm.
I will use that information to collaborate with it.
And that's what it should be. I'm
Yeah,
100% for that.
yeah,
The issue is not the AI. AI
yeah.
technology is quite fascinating. It's not, I mean, it's problematic and it's not perfect, but the issue is not the AI. It's the
It's more.
human people who think producing more has more value than
Yeah,
quality than the process of creation. And
yeah.
that's systemic. That's about, oh, we're opening. I mean, for me, at least the way I saw AI was that, or technology in general, technology is supposed to make it easier for people to have more time. But
Yeah.
now we're filling our time with having to produce more
Yeah.
rather than figuring out ways that we can enjoy life more. And that's what kind of Spark Collaborative was about. Let's find ways where we can enjoy our work and our lives
Yeah.
and feel productive and creative all at the same time.
Well,
Yeah.
this is great. I tend to be a burst worker who has who can get a lot done.
Mhm.
Um, I've usually a pretty high capacity, and I'm also getting older, so like I'm seeing that capacity start to like I'm like, okay, you know what? It's the end of the day. It's the end of the day. I'm gonna stop. But
But isn't
where
that
I
a
used to
good
be like,
thing?
oh, just a little longer.
Isn't that a good, I mean, so that me too. Like I can produce, I mean, I'm slacking a little. I'm in the middle of writing a new fiction book, but I can write a book quickly. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect, it needs editing and everything,
Right.
but when I sit down and focus on a creative project and I'm into it and everything,
Yeah.
the universal lines, I just do it and it's done. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow. But then I can't work for another two, then it's
Yeah.
a slump.
Right.
And
Then
I
it's like how I am when I come back from conferences. Um, my husband used to complain because I would go to a conference for 3 days and I would come back and I would like drop my stuff at the door and I didn't want to talk for like 3 days.
and that's I think that's a natural thing. I mean, for me, the cycles can even be I can be really productive for 2, 3 solid hours at a time in a day. It can be sometimes be
Yeah.
longer than that, depending on what I'm doing, but that I'm getting bam, 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 and then you hit the crash. And I think that's natural. I mean, maybe it's not, maybe some
It's natural for you. That's all
it's
that
natural
matters.
for
Yeah.
me, and I know that there's other people that that's natural for. So the question is why?
Right.
But the reality is that I will guarantee you, and nobody's ever going to admit this in the business world, that there's more time wasted when you're sitting there like you have to be working from 9 to 5. There's more time wasted on stupidity. And if there's, you're probably getting solid work for a
Yeah.
few hours. And I think I would argue that that's probably true for most people, you know?
That's a good tag back to my whole time audit thing because
Yeah.
so look, when I did my time audits, I found a couple things out. First, I found out that I was spending the right amount of effort on the different projects that I had, right? Because I'm on a couple of grants and this grant is 5%, that grant's 20%. So I found out that I was in general over time, I was spending the right amount of effort where I needed to be.
For
So
each
that was
one.
good.
Yeah.
Yep. Sometimes it was a little more, sometimes a little less, and it all evened out. So then the other thing I found out is that when I was in a physical office, I was only able to work mostly it was right around 6 hours in a day, but sometimes it was like five because of, there's other people in there and I love
Interruption.
people
Yeah.
and well, I think they loved me. And we would talk to each other sometimes, I'd get up to use the bathroom and I'd end up in a 10-minute conversation, or I'd get up to
Where
go to the
someone
break
has a
room to grab
question.
a
Yeah.
snack and end up in a 10-minute conversation. And those were all great. They didn't result in I know that they kept saying, "Oh, but you need the water cooler conversations in order to have better collaboration." Those didn't result in collaboration. They just resulted in
Good
more
conversations.
connection. Yeah, and
Yeah.
good connections.
Yeah.
Um, so what's funny though is that when I'm home, I'm like hyper focused. And so I
Yeah.
have a home
Me too.
office now. I'm hyper focused and I can end up like I'll end up 8 to 5 or 6 or occasionally 7. Sometimes
Because
my
you're
husband will come down.
enjoying what you're doing and you're focused and you're not getting distractions.
Yeah,
I
but I'm not
yeah.
saying that's good. I've recently asked
I
if
think
there
it's
was an office
balanced.
nearby that I could
Yeah.
maybe go to. I could
Well,
check
I
out
think
for a
one
day.
thing that I'm discovering is I'm getting a little stir crazy because I very rarely leave the house anymore, and that's not healthy. To have an outside place which
Yeah.
is dedicated to work and a joint office, a shared office, that makes sense
Yeah.
because of the energy that you get from, because I do believe that creativity or like you feed off of the energy of the people in the room with you, and I
Yeah.
think that that's important. But that is part of, I want to come back to a point you said about water cooler collaboration.
Yeah.
Collaboration is not something that just spontaneously happens. It's an intentional
It's an
process.
Yes.
And so you can have, yeah, I mean, you can have a conversation at a water cooler that sparks an idea that you go back and work on in the office that leads to an actual collaboration. That is possible. But if
Yeah.
you really want intentional collaborations, then you have to bring people together
Yes.
in a space and first get to know one another, get to know goals, get to know purposes, get to know intentions and where those diverge, and then work through it. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that you and I are aligned with that. But
Yeah.
what happens a lot in business is that focus on product is so intense
Yeah.
that we forget that that human kind of that there's a shift, there's a flow, and
Connection before content.
connection before content. And I think that's a really brilliant saying, and I'm going to have to find that book.
Oh,
I don't even know
Lisa,
what to
can I
say. Yeah.
just quick say one more thing? It's
Yeah.
funny that they mentioned water cooler conversations during that period because water cooler conversations were always known as where the gossip happened, not
Yeah.
and where the complaints about management happened or where it was not a collaboration space. So it's really
Right. It
kind of
was
funny
the
that they used
best.
that.
It was a connection space. It was a connection.
Yes.
Part of the purpose for me of this podcast and my all of the work I'm doing is okay, we're heading towards at least here in the US, we're heading towards a society that is going to be there's only one way to be. You must
Mhm.
work till you die. Work till you die. You must work all day. And then you're allowed a little bit of time. You must procreate. Remember that. You must
Yep.
procreate.
You must whistle while you work too. You need to
You must
be happy
you must
that you have a
pretend that you
job.
are happy at all times and you are not allowed to get sick. And if you are sick, then you still must work. That I mean, that's what we're heading towards. And but imagine a world where we say no to that. And at the point of like, live your life and screw those rules. I'm going to get us in trouble. But you know what I mean? I just don't see that's we're dooming ourselves because the more
Mhm.
productive, the more money, 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 or destroy the universe to get richer kind of attitude we have, the
Mhm.
more we're not going to have anything joyful in our lives. So why not just be joyous and creative and forget the rest?
I've been thinking a lot lately about what do I need?
Mm,
Maybe I haven't been thinking like what do I need to feel joyous and creative, but I think I'll add that into the
mhm.
like what do I need to feel joyous and creative? What will it take? I often can find joy and creativity in any moment or in most moments. I shouldn't say any moment,
Mhm.
but in most moments. But I
Goes
wonder
off.
if some people, as they're seeking joy, I think there might sometimes be a confusion, and there sometimes they might actually genuinely believe that more money and always the pursuit of always seeking more money is something they need in order to feel joy, even though we know what the research points to, that it points
Mhm.
to, at a certain point, it just you're not really getting any more joy from money. You've got to have that kind of intrinsic motivation.
I like the idea, like the need for joy. And I want to pause for a second and say there's a difference between joy and happiness. Like happiness, joy is just that. I'm not saying that we can all be joyous at all the
Right.
time, right? It's a process.
Right.
But you can be sad and still be joyous in a way. Like sad
Right.
something's over, but enjoy
Yeah.
like enjoyed that it happened or whatever. But
Yeah.
happiness as a goal, you know what I mean, is disturbing. And I think where
Yeah.
what you're getting at is that we should be paid for the work we do. We should be
Yeah.
valued completely. There should be, I mean, until or unless society shifts that money isn't the source of like how you would get food and
Right.
until unless that shifts, we all need money. It's an unfortunate
Yes.
reality of our society. But to me, the higher need is joy, safety,
Mm.
love. But it doesn't mean you're a failure if it doesn't look like how other people define it. I guess for me, it's just we need to find more ways that are looking at the world that's not focused on the quantitative assessment of our value, because that is fake. Even though it
Mhm.
seems like the most real thing in our society, it's
Yeah.
made up.
It's kind of Funny because I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, wait, what was the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs again? Like, what was, and I don't know if
Um,
Maslow's hierarchy is still used. It's been a while since I've talked about it. Yeah, I did. It's self-actualization, which I did remember that. And now this may not be the definition of it, but the thing I'm looking at right now says achieving one's full potential and creativity. So I don't know if and creativity has been added because I don't remember
well,
creativity
I've
being part of
seen a
it.
new version. I've seen a version now that has the pyramid, and I'll see
Yeah,
if I can find it and add it here. But around that, there's a circle that's creativity and innovation. Because
interesting.
it's
Yes.
saying that that is the tool that that allows that hierarchy of needs, but we also need to live in that kind of I mean, from the beginning, humans have been creative, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
The creativity is,
Look at all those cave
yeah,
drawings.
cave drawings to tell a story, a cave draw. No, but I mean it like those.
Inventions. Yeah.
Yeah, to tell a story or storytelling at by a fire so that you could learn where the food was,
Yeah.
which was so you were it was like the informative way to get the needs achieved,
Hmm.
right? Like you need food. Where's the food? Well, this hunter just went and found a herd of buffalo. I don't know. I'm making this all up. And then they share that with the rest of the.
That's where the fish tales came in, right? Like this, there was one this big,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
missed it. And I
But I
got the
mean,
smaller one instead.
but it was all about creativity and it was all about education through sharing stories, which is very much what I think of as creativity is like a way of sharing stories and stuff like that. So you can't achieve the needs unless you have that broader toolbox, which is
Hmm.
letting yourself learn and grow. But if you can only achieve the needs by following strict rules, you can't necessarily achieve them, especially
Yeah.
if there's someone up here saying, well, you're not working enough.
Someone in here saying, "Oh, you're not
Oh,
working
you're
enough,"
not
because
working
I
enough. Oh,
hear that
definitely.
all the time.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely a person inside, but that person to me represents society. It's something
Yeah.
that comes from the outside. But I've been totally addicted to K-dramas lately. It's a thing, whatever. But I was watching one, an interesting one yesterday that was about it's a nurse going into who works at a psychiatric hospital. One of the characters in it has panic attacks, panic disorder, whatever they called it. And he had it started when he was at a work, at a job, and it was like he was being inundated. He was really good at what he did, and everyone asked him for help, and it was getting busy, 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 and he was working all the time. And so he had left that. In the end, he goes back to get a new job because he's gotten control of the disorder. And it's starting again that they start you know, you got to do more. You got to do more. You can't
Hmm.
let slack off. He talks to his boss, says, "Can I prioritize like getting settled first?" And the boss is like, "No, no, no, you must work more." And then he stands up for himself at 6 o'clock and says, "It's quitting time now." And they're like, "No, it isn't." And he's like, "Yes, it is. I have to prioritize my health. I have to prioritize myself. I am contracted to work 40 hours a week, and that is what I will work." And he walks out. Like that's the attitude we should have.
That is so, oh my gosh, it's something I've actually even experienced where I had a really horrible boss once and they did not like me trying to stand up for they would pile lots of work on me and I would say, can we prioritize like what really needs to be done versus like what, you know,
Want me to do or what you
yeah,
feel
or
like.
versus what like can be done over time
Yeah.
or can be dropped if need be because this is too much. I tried to do the adult thing and go and talk about it and he didn't like that. He would literally say, "Do it all anyway." And so it was very stressful. I mean, I remember several times before we were trying to take a few days to go visit like my husband's sister. So, I remember curled up on the floor in the fetal position, like bawling because I knew I felt like I was being pulled in a ton of directions. I was at risk of losing my job if I didn't get the things done. And I was at risk of damaging my marriage if I didn't like take a vacation and take a break. And many times my husband was like, "Oh my gosh, like if you would feel better if we stayed, we can stay. But then I worked, right?
Right.
So it was hard. So I actually have been in the position where I would talk to my colleagues because they always were working many, many, many hours trying to anticipate this boss's needs before he asked for them because he didn't like it if he got to the point where he was asking you for something, then you were behind already. And so it was really this vicious cycle. And I would talk to my colleagues and say, stop doing that. You
And what
know,
it takes is a collaborative effort by everybody, because if one person says, no, this is wrong, it's not going to
yeah,
change anything. But if everybody says, no, this is wrong, we're not going to do this anymore,
yeah.
then change can happen. And I think that's something that we
It,
all need to be aware of, that collaboration is the only way to free up
it is, but the other
space.
thing that happens is I
Yeah.
think that we have a couple of generations here, Xers and millennials, I think especially. Those two generations have from our the two previous generations have had some things really like shoved into our minds about
Mhm.
what's what's right. And so that's where I think sometimes we put these artificial deadlines on ourselves when we actually could think about it and say, wait, it doesn't really need to be that deadline. Or
Yeah.
we put these artificial expectations on ourselves of like, I'm not doing enough, clearly. I need to do more. Yeah.
Because
And
we were
so,
told that we can do everything, and the reality is you can only do everything if you give
yep.
yourself the space to do everything.
Yes. Yeah. And so we
Yeah,
need to lean on each other.
right. And I think that's missing a lot right now. It's a sad state of being.
Bring the mood up.
Let's bring the movie up. What advice do you have for people who want to find more collaborative, more creative,
Mm,
um, ways where everyone which are where everyone can have a voice and a say, and that it's not like that the part that you're going to achieve a goal,
mhm.
but that it's truly collaborative. So like you earlier, you were talking about how, sometimes you've got these wicked problems, which I love that term because I'm from New England, and the fact that wicked is like a business
These
term.
problems are wicked hard.
They're wicked problems. And but I love the idea that there are problems that we can't solve to the extent of like what one person thinks the solution is. It has to be,
Mm,
I mean, we can bring it to the terms of society, like um climate change, and that is not going to be solved by one idea. It requires input from everything. So but then you run into that, well, we have to, the task list versus the actual process of collaboration.
mm.
What advice do you have to make the collaboration stronger, or to achieve the goals without with the
Yeah.
focus on process?
I I think that any group who wants to work on something together needs a little bit of both task and process.
Right.
I would say that in the beginning, you need to be a little bit more heavy on process than task, but there should be a little task only because I want to honor that there are a lot of people um, who become very weary of process more quickly and feel like
Mhm.
nothing's moving forward. And so I think you need to understand or have an understanding that there needs to be some small things that are happening up front while you're engaging in the process pieces of it. And the process pieces are anything from like, let's just get to know each other. Let's just chat about our lived experience with this issue. Let's chat about why we're here. Let's chat about who we are and who we want to be together, right? And then um, at the same time, you need to have some conversation about what might we do together, right? There's the who we want to be together, which is a little bit separate from what might we do together and how might we get started doing it. But you don't have to jump right into like we're going to just do together. We also need to be together. Does that make sense?
That completely makes sense. It's
Okay.
making what if you're entering a big project and you do some of those bonding games,
Hmm.
you yes and each other from the world of improv. And while at the same time you say, okay, let's create a goals. Like what are
Yeah.
our goals? What will the air, the markers be that we're achieving
Yeah.
X,
Or
Y,
like, what's our
Z?
first goal, right? We don't even have to
Where?
say, we don't even have to lay out all the goals. Like, what's our
Right.
first goal
What's
together?
our first goal? But I mean, you could have, like, I think you always have to have in mind that end goal. You do have to have the product in mind. And so you do have that because that kind of frames, that's like the outer
Yeah.
frame. This is what we achieve. And then the minor steps could be what's our first step? And then what are some other steps that we think might come up, but always changing, and like creating that collage of goals together so that every time you meet or every time so that people don't, that you can then say, oh, look, we achieved this little goal.
Hmm.
We exchanged numbers. Yay, we
Yeah.
won.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the process and the tasks are integrated in some
Yeah.
way. I've worked a lot with people with disabilities,
Hmm.
and at the parents or the caregivers always want to know what's the end goal. And
Yeah.
it's hard to explain, but
Yes.
then as you introduce it to them, you say, well, look, that person who is on the spectrum somewhere, who has,
Yeah.
never looked me in the eye, but look what he did today. And he looked me in the eye and we had a conversation. That's the goal achieved, but you
Yeah.
can't, the little steps to
And
it
it
are
and it
subtle.
doesn't, to a lot of people, sometimes things like that don't feel like enough of a step, but it's
Right.
actually huge. Um I remember talking with, there's
Um,
this professor at UW-Madison. Her name is Kathy Kramer. She wrote a really great
Good
book
name.
on, are you familiar with Kathy?
No, I just said it's a
Oh,
good name because
oh, Kramer, yes.
no.
So she wrote this great book called The Politics of Resentment. And I won't go into like politics right now, but
Yeah.
um I had a conversation with her like a few years after that book came out, and there was a project I was working on, and we met, and we talked about this idea of like of how conversations, and I think this actually came from I'm remembering the conversation, but I'm remembering where the quote actually came from. So I remember I was talking with a group of people in my office. I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, so here's the quote. The
Yeah,
quote is, and I don't know if it's a real quote or if I
I'll
modified
do
it
the
a bit, but it's
research.
basically like the you can change the world one conversation at a time.
Amen.
And that
Amen.
conversation doesn't have to be about like, okay, so let's put our heads together and decide what we're going to do together. That conversation can just be like, again, who are you? Where's your heart? What's your perspective? Who am I? Where's my heart? What's my perspective? Oh, thank you for giving me that perspective. I've never thought about things that way. Like it can just be that little shift of
Yeah.
like, I learned something new today about how someone else feels about the same thing. And it's slightly different than how I feel about it, but my eyes were opened a little bit. Like that's how you
And
change the
and if you need to, you can click off, learn the other's perspective. That would be a goal
Yeah, yeah.
achieved. Learn the other's perspective. Check.
And that whole idea for me came from reading, and I don't know if it's a direct quote, so I want to make sure that if it is a direct quote that I give credit where credit is due. But that whole thing came from my reading of Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy book.
Mhm,
And I highly recommend that to anyone who does collaborative work,
mhm.
collaborative and creative work. But yeah, this idea that change happens in fractals, and in nature, fractals are, oh gosh, I shouldn't even have brought that word up because fractals are like little repeats of
But that
like,
makes sense that
yeah,
we because society has told us to only see achievement by that big picture thing, the
yeah,
final thing, the whatever that might look like. And yet every day, like us just having a conversation now is helping me achieve a goal.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we are
right?
still achieving goals.
I
Yeah.
am achieving a goal even as we ramble and as we kind of just explore, and it's great. And that's for me part of the key to a better future is us just embracing and celebrating the wins every day. Value in recognizing our own cycles and that we can't always constantly be producing, that we have to
Yeah.
be that one of the cycles of creativity, one of the cycles of just existence is lying fallow.
If we talk about this, I think that's where the change, the wider change comes in.
Yeah.
So earlier I had that example of we um have a conversation and you share your perspective with me, I share my perspective with you, and maybe I'm like, "Oh, that was interesting. I never thought of it that way before." That doesn't mean that I've changed my perspective. It means that I've expanded my understanding of the
Mhm.
issue. And so then I go and talk to someone else and I'm like, "Oh, that perspective is really interesting. I just heard this other perspective where I'm not sharing your story that you shared with me.
Right.
I'm not sharing it as though I've taken it on, but I'm kind of storing all of that up as like, oh wow, there's there's so much more to know about this. And now, if I'm in any kind of a role where I am making trying to make a decision about something or whatever, I can take all of those perspectives in, and I might again, it maybe isn't that my perspective is completely changed because it's also my story and my
Mhm.
experiences that led to that, but I'm like, oh, other people feel this way and this way and this way, you know, I might change my decisions that I make and how I act in the world.
Right. I think it's about accommodating perspectives as opposed
Yes.
to one idea dominating another and saying,
Yeah.
well, I don't care what, because that's what a lot of the top down kind of perspective way we function in society
Yeah.
is my way or the highway. There's no room for, especially nowadays with divides where people are just really not listening to each other. We're talking about listening to different perspectives and acknowledging different perspectives and then saying, okay, well, how can we change so that it accommodates those this different
Yes.
perspectives? And yes, sometimes perspectives are bad. There are things that people think or believe that
Yeah.
are really harmful. But that's when you come into my rules of living, which are do no harm. Don't
Yeah.
harm another human by
Right.
forcing your ideal
Or
idea.
even through exclusion, right? Because
Yeah.
exclusion is harm as well. And I want to
Yes.
bring that up because I think a lot of times when people think do not harm, some people who I think believe that exclusion is not doing harm, and it is.
And
I
it
guess
is,
that's the main
yes.
point I wanted
Yeah.
to
And
make.
that's what that was kind of, you said it better than I did. That's what I was trying to explore with with the 4B thing is like exclusion of any kind is not
Yeah.
healthy. It's not good. It's not going to make any change. But recognize, like, for me, it all came down to choice. Absolutely.
Mm.
If you are a person who does not think that, wants to separate yourself from men, then you have the choice to do that. But don't try and force that as a movement onto
Yes.
every other woman in society, because that's
Yes.
just as bad as saying that we have to be married and have children and blah, 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 blah,
That you have no role in society
that you have
if you
no role in, if
are
you
a
don't. If
cat
you
cat owning childless cat person. That's what it is. If you're a
yeah.
childless cat person, that you
Right.
don't have a
Yeah. And
role in society.
that's so harmful. So I love this idea about like being open and hearing and that one of the steps towards change or towards achieving goals is by going, that's a different perspective. How does that
Mhm.
affect mine? Okay, maybe I haven't changed my mind, but maybe I can allow for that perspective by saying, okay, you get to choose that, but do not let that
Mhm.
choice interfere with the choices of other people. That's what it all comes down to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the approach to solving these problems has to be collaborative. It has to be
Mhm.
and creative, collaborative and creative. So,
This has
but
been so lovely, though.
yes. Yes. So I think we could talk forever. So any final thoughts that you want to share? And please tell us how we can find you if anyone wants to find
Oh,
you. Weird.
oh, it's so funny because I was thinking about that when we got started.
Yes.
And I don't have my own website yet. I have like three that are in production, but I've not gotten them off the ground yet. So I would just say like through the sparkcollaborative.org.
Who are interested in connecting with other people who want to
Mhm.
have these difficult conversations, join us at sparkcollaborative.org.
And I would say, we have different workshops and stuff, and those are,
Yeah.
the community itself is free. And you'll notice when you go to the website that there's a number of links sort of every so often we have it spaced. Go to one of those links that are kind of spaced in the middle of the page because it's free, but it's a private community.
Yes.
So
And we built it that way intentionally because while we want to have open conversations, this is a scary world, and having toxic people coming in
yeah.
doesn't necessarily help build towards the change that needs to happen. And I guess that's dividing us from toxic people, but the reality is that's the safest division that needs to happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So thank you for having a conversation with me, and we'll see what comes out of this.
No, thank you so much for you've been asking for this for a while, and I am so happy it finally happened because this has been super lovely.
Yay, thank you. I enjoyed it.